What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Tailgate. We are Campus to Canton with the Better Sports Network. That is Nicholas Ian Allen. That is Colin Decker. I am Matt Bruening. I know it's been a while, and we've got a bunch of great college football games for you guys today. I cannot wait to dive into them. But before we get to that, guys, make sure you join us today for the game, Ohio State versus Michigan. We are gamifying college football today in the Better Cast app. Watch the game, chat with fans, and test your college football knowledge to win tickets to purchase authentic sports merchandise. Pre-game questions are now live. Download the free BetterCast app and answer them now. Available in the App Store, Google Play Store. No purchase necessary. Always free to play. Colin, Nick, we've got to start with the game. We're going to talk some game props here. We're going to talk a lot about the game today. It's in my opinion, the most important game of the day. Bias taken away from that, I think. It's by far the most important game.
You got a little something on your shirt
Nick,
there.
Do I? Oh, just a little thing I threw on, real quick, trying to get ready. I didn't really think much of it. I just had to get it.
Yeah,
get ready. Got a bunch of the game props listed here. Give me a couple of them that you'd be willing to go over or under on. What are your thoughts about the game before we dive in and talk about what happened yesterday? We had a lot of big games happen on Friday, Black Friday, for Rivalry Week kicking off.
I think with JJ McCarthy, that's a pretty low line for his rushing total, 11.5. I know sacks are going to come into play there, and Ohio State does have a really nice defensive line this year. They really get after the quarterback. But if the game plan that Michigan used against Penn State, if they use any of that game plan against Ohio State, I think this is an easy over. And even if they don't, I think JJ McCarthy could get this in one run, to be honest. So I like that over 11.5 rushing yards there for JJ McCarthy. I think that's my favorite out of the ones that you've listed.
Under.
Yeah, I think under. I'd probably lean under on a lot of these. My projections might not, fully go that direction, across the board. But I think that these are two of the best defenses of the country, two of the best teams in the country, obviously. So when we see, 94.5 receiving yards for Marvin Harrison Jr., he's absolutely capable of doing that, but that's a pretty big number for anybody against Michigan. And so I think that, I would be tempted to take the under on that. And then one that I'm sure we'll talk about in a few segments, Michigan is favored by 3.5, depending on where you see it. And my number's like Ohio State. I mean, Michigan is favored in 2 of my 3 projection models.
Let's go, Nick.
But it's by, a point and a half. And we talked a couple of weeks ago. We thought there was some pretty good value on Ohio State over 11.5 wins with, I think, 3 games remaining. So, yeah, I think I'm pretty firmly on the Ohio State side of things in most categories today.
Smash that money line, baby. I like the Emeka Egbuka plus 200 anytime touchdown. I think he's scoring today. We got some sickos in the chat, though, Nick, asking about your thoughts on Drake despite their 32-point underdogs. I didn't know. I don't know if he's talking about a Drake-Will Smith battle, which, that guy, Chris Moxley, myself, and Felix Sharp would really be into, but I assume he's talking about
the Drake Bulldogs, I think. Are they the Bulldogs?
Sure. That is correct. Let's go. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. This is in my best picks of the day. So maybe we save that. I don't know.
So Mr. Moxley, you can sit tight. We will get to your question later. Yeah. Thank you for posting that, though.
But
before go ahead.
No, you go.
Before we jump into the games that kicked off yesterday, I do want to ask both of you, Malik Neighbors, which I'm going to be like, I knew he was having a good season. I did not realize this. He is 133 yards away from setting the all-time LSU receiving record, a season record. You guys think he gets it today?
I mean, with the way that Brian Kelly's been stat padding all year, I think he's probably very conscious of this record. I think the way to beat Texas A&M would be through the air as well. Their front seven has been very good. Their rushing defense has been very good. So I could very easily see him getting this. It's a really high number, but I think there's a good shot he gets there.
I've got Neighbors projected for 117.9 today. So if he's anywhere in that neighborhood, I think that they will do their very best to get him to get that 133. So that was news to me. I didn't realize the record is within reach, and it definitely does seem within reach, I think.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, he's going to benefit from Jaydon Daniels trying to win that Heisman. Colin, it's rivalry week. Your Penn State Nittany Lions played. I guess you could argue played last night. I don't know. That was much of a game. What game are you looking forward to the most today, though?
Man, there's a lot of good ones on today. I think the game is the easy answer here, especially as a Penn State fan. You know, we lost to both of the teams in that game and have had struggles with those two teams for years. But if we're going to, go outside of the obvious one here, I really want to see Florida State versus Florida. I want to see how Florida State bounces back after the loss of Jordan Travis. I think that's going to be a huge hurdle for them. If they win this game against Florida, they only have to win one more game. They win that ACC championship. And I think they're still in the playoffs. If they come out and they beat a Florida team and a ranked Louisville team, then I think the committee will still put them in, even with Jordan Travis down. So I want to see how they adapt their game plan going up against Florida here, because that's an all-around good team, but they did lose kind of the heart of that team, Jordan Travis. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on the Florida Cup there.
So
yeah, more news on the game coming out real quick, Nick, before you give us yours. Left tackle Ladarius Henderson and his backup Miles Hinton are both listed as questionable, which we knew they were injured, but that could be good news for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Colin hit on probably the two best answers there for
Sorry,
sure.
Nick,
if you're
didn't mean
no,
to
that's
steal your
a
thunder.
I understand. I get to go first in a lot of the categories, a lot of the segments. So I'm sure I take a lot of the best ones. So I'm digging a little bit deeper here today. But how about UNLV? One of the best Michigan, one of the best wins Michigan has on its schedule right now, quite honestly. They are going up against San Jose State today. There's a chance for UNLV to make it to the Mountain West Championship. They're a 3-point favorite last I saw. My numbers see it a little bit closer than that, but I've been just incredibly impressed with UNLV so far this season. Another one that definitely caught my eye is New Mexico State and Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State is one of those teams that, has their 6 wins, has more, and needs a little help from some of the teams that, have an opportunity to get bowl eligible for Jacksonville State to get an invite to a bowl, because they're one of those teams transitioning to FBS. New Mexico State's been solid this year. It already has a spot in the Conference USA Championship game locked up. They're a 2.5-point favorite. I was very surprised. I've actually got Jacksonville State favored in this game. So that should be a good one. Probably going to get overlooked. But if some of these, late afternoon, early evening games start to look a little more like blowouts, that one, looks like it could be one of the better games back and forth throughout the day, especially in that window.
All right, so to recap some of the games from Black Friday yesterday, you had TCU, Oklahoma beating up on TCU 69-45. Might have seen Dylan Gabriel's final regular season game with Oklahoma. Don't know if he'll come back. I believe, according to Mr. Colin Decker, who's said multiple times on our network that he has one more year of eligibility, which is insane to me. Put this one in there just for our boy Chris Moxley. Tulane beats UTSA 29-16. I believe that means they locked up the chance to win the American Conference Championship, or at least play in the championship game. If they do that, they will be the G5 team that goes to back-to-back New Year's 6 bowl games. So that's a pretty big deal for Tulane.
Damn, you got robbed.
They did. I agree with you on that. I did want to ask you this, Colin, real quick. Michael Pratt. Felix and myself have been big fans of his since COVID. I believe Chris Moxley was as well. Had some pretty impressive throws yesterday. Didn't have a massive stat line, just 9 for 22, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Did add 50 rushing yards. Chris Moxley posted this on Twitter, and some people might have thought he was kidding. I don't think he was. QB3 in the 2024 class.
I think he's in that conversation. I think it's really going to depend on who comes out. We still have to wait on JJ McCarthy to come out. We have, gotten news that Quinn Ewers is going to go back, and he was the early favorite for the QB3 in the 2024 class. I think Michael Pratt definitely deserves to be in that conversation. He has looked very good, and he's only looked better in the biggest moments. That USC bowl game last year, 2 years ago, in that game against Oklahoma to open the season, where they took them down to the wire. So he performs well when the lights are brightest. I think he also accepted a Senior Bowl invite, I believe. So it does sound like he's going to be coming out in this class, which, if I was advising him, I would probably have him come out next year, transfer to a Power 5 school, show you can do it at a higher level. Not that Tulane hasn't been great, but chance to go to back-to-back New Year's Six games, which is really impressive. But I think one more year on tape and in a less loaded quarterback class would probably be better for him. But he does have an NFL future. He will be on an NFL roster. I think he's got a lot of the traits that teams are going to look for. And we've seen how many rookie quarterbacks start this year. It's 15, I think, or something like that. It's like a record in the NFL this year in terms of rookie quarterbacks starting. So he's going to make an NFL roster. He only needs a shot. So QB3, not out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I love the arm talent, so I'm right there with you. I do think he should have gone back, but I didn't know he took the Senior Bowl invite, but there was a lot of talk about his mom was at the game yesterday, saying this is the last time he was going to be on the college football field. I mean, Alabama, there were rumors. I'm sorry, we don't know for sure. Rumors that Alabama, Florida, I want to who was there. There was another big name school that was after him last year. Might have been Notre Dame in the transfer portal, and he didn't take him. I agree with you. I think if he would have gone to the P5 and showed what he's already shown us at Tulane, I mean, nobody else in that class for next year has really been that impressive. So I'm very intrigued to see what ends up happening with him. Texas Tech versus Texas. Texas puts a beat down on Texas Tech, 57-7. Quinn Ewers, the stat line, just like Michael Pratt, not super impressive. I thought was very impressive yesterday. 17-26, 196 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But the guy that I took the most away from in that game was Jaydon Blue, Nick. 10 for 121 and 1. Should Jaydon Blue transfer, and do you think he could start somewhere next season?
It's a good question. I mean, could he start? Absolutely. He could start at 100 different programs, most likely. I was very impressed. It was great to see him get an extended opportunity, because certainly starting this year was a bit buried on the depth chart. Hate to see somebody in front of him go down with such a significant injury, but good to see him take advantage of that opportunity. Will he transfer, though? I don't know. I mean, the situation at running back is, of course, a little bit different. You guys are much better at projecting, NFL talent and potential. But one thing that I've tried to do is be, just sort of a reactionary to this type of thing. Like, if a guy transfers, then I'm going to dig in and see, how that could benefit him. But some guys just really love a program, love the guys that they're playing with, believe in the coaching staff that they've got there, want to win a national championship. Jaydon Blue could transfer to 75 or 100 different programs, but could he really be the workhorse at a national championship caliber program? I don't know. And certainly perhaps he could, but the situation where he is in Texas, especially if Ewers is coming back, I expect that they'll be, a top 5 team preseason at worst. Maybe he just wants to be, part of a really, really talented backfield at Texas with a shot to win a national championship next year, and then, still could get enough touches and enough opportunity to appeal to NFL scouts, and then also perhaps protect himself a little bit by not, getting 250, 300 carries somewhere. So I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me one way or the other. But if I were to guess right now, I would probably say that he's at Texas next year.
Colin, any thoughts on Jaydon Blue?
Yeah, I think Nick nailed it there. Is he going to transfer? It's hard to say. He is a Texas kid, though. So I think one spot that I would really like to see him go if he does enter the portal is TCU. I think, Amani Bailey is a guy that we could see.
No. Cameron Cook.
Oh, I forgot you're a Cameron Cook guy.
I am a massive.
It's all right. He's a little undersized. He needs a little bit of time to bulk up before he can handle that backfield. So we'll let Blue get in there, work with Cook in like a 1A, 1B, 1-2 punch, and then Cook can take over after that. But I think that TCU is likely to lose Amani Bailey this year. He's having a under the radar, really nice year this year. I think he's over 1,100 yards, I believe, pushing 1,200. So I could see, a couple nice schools in Texas for him. He doesn't have to go far from home. Corey P in the chat saying Texas Tech could be really interesting with the way that they've used Taj Brooks this year, which has been a massive surprise. I mean, he's over 1,500 yards, I believe. So a couple of nice schools in Texas that he could go to, not too far away. And then we can see Blue and our guy, Cedric Baxter, unleashed at Texas. They can both succeed.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will depend on if Jonathan Brooks comes out or not, which we haven't heard anything of which way he's leaning. Obviously, unfortunately, tore his ACL a couple weeks ago. The last big game, Oregon State versus Oregon. I thought this was going to be a closer game. Oregon ends up winning 31-7. Bo Nix 33 of 40 for 367 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Pretty much setting up. I actually don't even think it matters. Even if Washington loses the Apple Cup today to Washington State, we will get a rematch of Washington versus Oregon next week on Championship Week. Should be one of the better games of Championship Weekend. But Nick, I know I've heard Colin talk about the Heisman. We've had our arguments on Devy debate about who should win the Heisman. Bo Nix for Heisman, or who are you picking to win the Heisman here in a couple weeks?
So I mean, you know me, I'm super lukewarm. I don't have a whole lot of just strong opinions that I'm ready to stand up and shout about. I could see it going to Nix. I could see it going to Penix. I could see it going to Jaydon Daniels. I mean, the numbers, Daniels is in a class all by himself. It's just whether or not having 3 losses is going to be enough to drag him down. And the fact that he is in, not going to be playing in the SEC championship game. I said this last week, and I think it is still true that, Michael Penix or Bo Nix or, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr., somebody else who's a little lower on the list, we're going to see something, in a huge game today. Harrison Jr. would have that opportunity. Or Nix or Penix, we're going to see a huge game-winning drive, play of the year type thing next Friday night that, they'll have the stage to themselves there for the Pac-12 championship game for that Heisman moment. So I could absolutely see an undefeated Michael Penix being, the player that led Washington to that college football playoff spot, getting that Heisman love because, you think about it, what would Washington be without Penix? He has a case, I think, as the most valuable player in college football. That's not the criteria. They want the most outstanding player. So some might interpret that to be Jaydon Daniels because he's just been absolutely incredible, huge numbers, could definitely be a, RG3, Lamar Jackson type winner that just blows away the field with the numbers. And especially that could happen if we don't get, one of those just Heisman moments from a guy like Nix or Penix.
I was going to say how badly I think it was going to be Jaydon Daniels winning this. You just talked me into it, Nick. Folks, if you're watching, if you're listening, right now you can get plus 3,300 on one Marvin Harrison Jr. He is going to win Ohio State the game today. He's going to crush whatever crappy corners Iowa throw out against him in the Big Ten championship next week. 2 massive weeks. He's going to win that Heisman because Michael Penix isn't taking Washington to the playoffs. They're going to lose next week to Oregon. Oregon's the better team. And Bo Nix, he's like an 8th-year senior. Let it go, guys. Give the best wide receiver in the world, who you snubbed last year for the Bolitnikoff, by the way, and you're probably going to snub again this year, the Heisman. All right. We're going to talk about our rankings now. Top 10 quarterbacks for, what is this,
13.
week 12?
Or yeah,
13,
yeah.
week 13. See, Colin, this is why you should have been driving here. You throw me under the bus before the show, and I can't even remember what week is what. All right, so number one, Jaydon Daniels for LSU. He's not facing LSU. Sorry about that. Caden Salter. Number 3, Byron Brown. Number 4, Bryson Barnes. 5, Carson Beck. 6, Joey McGuire. 7, Preston Stone. Almost thought about making him my start today. 8, Chandler Rogers. 9, Jalen Milroe. 10, Jordan McLeod. 11, Drake May. 12, Max Johnson. 13, Donovan Smith. And 14, Jacobino. Well, I said top 10. We're giving you 14. Nick, give us some of your favorite starts on this list this week.
So I was a little surprised, and Brett in the chat mentioned, put out with a question mark, Michael Penix. Surprised that he's not on this list. He is number 7 for the week in my rankings, and I imagine he's one of the first few off here. So he would definitely be one that I think is worthy of a spot. I'm not going to try to get too cute on that and sitting Penix today. I definitely think he's in line for a good day. One note. We do have Bryson Barnes listed pretty high here. He's actually not going to start for Utah today. They are going with Luke Batari, who is a senior junior college transfer. First game action, I think. So that one is one to be aware of, but it is a good matchup against that Colorado defense. But I could not in good conscience suggest you go out and grab Luke Batari and put him in your lineup for a championship matchup today. But definitely think that Penix is worth a look. Also think a guy that was a feature in this top 14 for most of the season, but has fallen off. We've been a little bit disappointed with the Western Kentucky offense so far this year, but Austin Reed today against FIU, I think, is also a player that I would feel comfortable slotting in. In fact, will have him slotted in my one good team that I've got so far this year, and he comes in at 15th for the week for me as far as my projections go. But think he's in line for a great final regular season game.
So if you had to choose one of those two, Nick, so with Bryson Barnes being out, just so everybody knows, we make these a little bit ahead of time. We did not know that he was going to be announced out when this graphic was made. Michael Penix versus Washington State, or would you take Austin Reed today? Which one would you rather throw in here in the top 14 if you had to pick one?
So I lean on my numbers pretty heavily and do have Penix ahead, have him projected for 32.6 points this week. I have Austin Reed at 31.5, so there's not a big gap there, but Penix is projected slightly ahead, and do think that with everything that they've got to play for, that Washington's gonna want to lean on him for a big day today.
Colin, what about you? Any picks off this list that you are super high on?
Yeah, I really like Jacob Zeno and Chandler Rogers both, honestly, in that UAB and North Texas matchup. Jacob Zeno being down there at 14 makes a little bit of sense because he had a little bit of a disappointing week last week. But I think that game is going to be so high scoring. Both those offenses are clicking. They move the ball really well, and both those defenses are terrible. Two of the worst defenses in the country. I think UAB might be like bottom 2 or 3. So expect a lot of points in that one. I think the over-under was about 74 last time I checked. So a lot of points in that one. I like both of those two guys. And then I think Max Johnson's really interesting on this list too. I know LSU's defense is terrible. But I don't know how much I trust him, and I'm not sure. Has Evan Stewart?
He's also out.
Okay.
Max Johnson's also out. Jalen Henderson's going to be starting again this week.
Okay, so Jalen Henderson's starting this week. Yeah, either way, I'm not sure. I trust the quarterback in that Texas A&M matchup. So I would probably stay away from that one too.
Yeah, with so just to give everybody an idea of here. So with Bryson Barnes and Max Johnson both being out, we actually have Seth Hennigan from Memphis, who's playing Temple, and EJ Warner, Temple, playing Memphis, who have made their way into our top 14 with those two guys being announced out. So again, Seth Hedigan is now in the number 4 spot where Bryson Barnes is versus Temple, and EJ Warner right down there slides in at the bottom versus Temple. So those are your quarterbacks. I am all in on Seth Hedigan. He's a guy that I like as a true freshman. I thought had some like NFL upside. That is not quite like worked out the way I thought it was. And Jalen Milroe. I'm very excited to see what Jalen Milroe does against Auburn in the Iron Bowl today. I had that the kick 6 pop up on my feed the other day. It's one of the greatest moments of college football ever. So I love it. We're going to see that today with Emeka Kuka doing that against. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to make it all about the game. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I do have to say, Seth Hedigan had a pretty good game yesterday. so did EJ Warner.
Oh, yeah, good point.
EJ Warner went
That's
for 330 and 2 touchdowns.
Should have been started.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Little wonky today with so many Friday games.
Whoops.
Drake May would be,
let's just
up
let's
there.
Just slide right past it and talk about those running backs. We got running backs, right? We got a bunch of running backs that we're gonna have in our top 14. Let's see if I can mess that up as well. All right, so we've got RJ Harvey for UCF going up against Houston. Oscar Adaway, the third for North Texas, going up against UAB. Audric Estime, the Notre Dame running back, going up against Stanford. Ollie Gordon, the second Oklahoma State running back, going up against BYU. Omarion Hampton, Felix's favorite running back in the entire nation from North Carolina, going up against NC State. Kendall Milton, Georgia running back, going up against Georgia Tech. Jermaine Brown Jr., UAB running back, going up against North Texas. Devin Neal, Kansas running back, going up against Cincinnati. Dylan Johnson, Washington running back, going up against Washington State. Blake Corum, why would Blake Corum, Michigan running back, going up against the Ohio State University. DJ Giddens, Kansas State running back, going up against Iowa State. LaDamian Webb, South Alabama running back. I honestly don't know who they're playing today, guys, so I apologize about that. They're going up against Texas State. LJ Johnson Jr., Texas A&M running back. No, not Texas A&M running back, SMU running back. I apologize. I'm just messing all of this up. Versus Navy, and then Kamani Vidal. Nick, give us your best picks out of this list as well.
Yeah, so there are definitely some guys who've really come on strong at the end of the year. I mean, one, RJ Harvey, it's good to see him climb up to the top of this list because he has been very consistent all year. Oscar Adaway III, somebody who's really just kind of come on strong just in the last month plus, but is in a very good position. My projections are lower on him, but he has really climbed up the list. Jermaine Brown Jr. at UAB going against that North Texas team, one of the worst defenses in the country, and Jermaine Brown has lived up to a lot of the preseason hype. I was definitely a slow adopter, wasn't a big believer, wasn't sure he was going to get the touches, but partly he's been good enough, but partly also was able to take advantage of an injury to get there as well. Kamani Vidal has been good, but has come up short a little of expectations in the last month or so. But I think today against Southern Miss, which there was a report earlier today that Will Hall will be back for Southern Miss in 2024, head coach there, but still think that's a decent matchup for Vidal today. One, I know you scoffed at Blake Corum being top 10 on this list. I was a little surprised on the other side of things that I've actually got Travion Henderson in the top 10 in my projections this week. So probably
that's because you're a smart man.
Probably not giving that Michigan defense enough credit. We do adjust for opponent, but Henderson's he's been good when he's healthy. He's absolutely worthy of that spot. But today might not be the day. Usually I try to not overthink it when I've got one of the best players in college football. But against Michigan, I don't know. I might be tempted to go after, some of these teams or players that have better matchups, like a Brown, like a LaDamian Webb, like a Vidal, over Henderson, who does come out a little bit ahead in my personal projections.
Really quick in the chat, Colin, before you give us yours, Brett was asking about Dylan Johnson, who said he was in a boot after the game last week. I did watch him give a pretty passionate speech about playing in his first ever Apple Cup this week. I imagine he's going to play, and he's pretty fired up for that. But they are asking about Trey Benson tonight. I'll go to you first here, Nick. What do you think? Trey Benson, is he worthy of starting tonight? Brandon says that he always seems to get that wrong and a difficult start sit every week.
Yeah, I mean, Benson's been tough because Florida State does spread it around a little bit. I mean, Tafali is always capable of making a big play and kind of eating into Benson's opportunities. In weeks past, you always had to worry a little bit about Jordan Travis, breaking off a 25-yard touchdown run. Unfortunately for Travis and Florida State, that's not going to be an issue this week. So, perhaps you feel a little bit better about Benson. He does come in at number 22 for me this week. And, a handful of guys ahead of him have already played. So I do think that he's a pretty good option today against Florida. They're going to need him, thinking about, and we talked about this on the CFB Winning Edge podcast earlier this week. If you're trying to project or predict which one of those undefeated or top 5 teams is most likely to lose outright this week, I think it's pretty clearly Florida State, or to a unranked team. Obviously, Ohio State or Michigan are going to lose, but Florida State, for them to win, I think they really are going to need Benson. So I feel decent about him today. He projects pretty well, but I think even beyond that, they're going to need him a little bit more than my numbers suggest.
Yeah, I think I would trust Trey Benson this week as well. He was actually one of the guys that I listed as a start on the Campus Life podcast that drops on Tuesdays. Jordan Travis, we talked about the loss of him and how that's going to impact this offense as a whole. So they are going to need to lean on Trey Benson more, which, Mike Norvell is no stranger to using running backs. He did it all the time at Memphis. He had multiple highly successful running attacks there when he was at Memphis. And Jordan Travis has 7 rushing touchdowns on the year. So like Nick pointed out, Travis does vulture a lot of touchdowns. With him out, I think Benson's got a good chance of getting in the end zone. And the Florida's got a pretty susceptible rush defense. They allow 161.5 rush yards per game, which is 89th in the country. They're 44th worst in the country in defensive rush EPA per play. And they're the 4th worst team in defensive rush explosiveness. So like Brandon points out in the chat, he said he's got a gut feeling that Benson gets 1 or 2 long runs, explosive runs against that Florida defense. That is very, very possible. I could see him busting off a couple long ones there as well. So a couple long runs, getting in the end zone. He's been involved in the passing game in multiple weeks. I feel pretty good about Benson this week.
There any running backs that tickle your fancy there, Colin? That top 14?
Yeah, well, there's one that wasn't on the list. He's just outside, and that's Rasheed Ali, running back at Marshall, going up against Arkansas State. Arkansas State, I mean, they just blew the doors off of the team they played last week, Texas State. So that was, or was that 2 weeks ago? But either way, they're not, other than that game, they're not a very good defense at all. So I think Rasheed Ali is in line for a big game. And then, like Nick pointed out with Jermaine Brown Jr., he's been very good. I think there's a very good chance he ends up as the RB1 this week against a very, very soft North Texas defense in what we expect to be a very high-scoring matchup. So he would probably be my favorite play on this list.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Travion Henderson. 104 yards against Notre Dame, 162 against Michigan, 128 versus Rutgers, 148 versus Minnesota. Come on, guys. Come on, Iguodala Jr., DJ Gibb. Blake Corum? You're going to put Blake Corum over Travion Henderson? Disrespectful. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the top 14 wide receivers and tight ends for Week 13, including previewing more games, talking about Nick's top picks. We're going to talk about Drake, not the rapper, and many other things. We'll catch you guys right after the break.
I like to eat my feelings. So when I'm like super sad, single serving pint sizes of Ben and Jerry's, I just start shoveling that in, and it makes me feel bigger and better. But so let's eat our feelings here. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk football players, food. We're going to pair them up. Who is represented by what food? All right, I want to just shout out Hal Alexander in there for CMC. Christian McCaffrey is Rocky Road ice cream. A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
Does it?
Going Hal.
I like it, man. You know it. I love me some Rocky Road ice cream. Bijan Robinson prime rib. You know what? Bijan Robinson prime rib with a baked potato and some cream spinach on the side. That's what I'm talking about. That is the King's dinner. And Bijan Robinson, I don't care if the dude from the Athletics says only 301, touches. You know what? In honor of Card Sharks, I'm going to say, guys, that I think that number is going to be a little bit higher there for Bijan Robinson. So get your knife, get your fork, you got your steak, you got your Bijan.
Yeah, that's what's up. You're on death row, and they say you get one last meal, and you just say Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. Love it.
I got to jump in on one real quick because Mr. Scamper said Kareem Hunt is candy corn, and I actually had a player. Tyler Boyd was going to be candy corn for me, and basically it's that nobody likes it, but it's always there. It's always there, and somebody always puts their hand in and grabs some and has some, and they're like, well, and afterwards they're like, why did I eat that? That's Tyler Boyd. He always gets drafted, and he's just kind of there, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they take him. Nobody knows where it comes from. Where does the candy corn even come from? Like, it's just there. It's just there.
What's going on, guys? We are back campus to Canton. This is the Tailgate on the Better Sports Network. That is Nicholas Ian Allen. That is Colin Decker. I was going to point, but I'm probably going to point the wrong way. I am Matt Bruening, and we are gamifying college football today on the Better Cast app. Play a free contest during the Ohio State-Michigan game today at 12 Eastern. The game. You do not want to miss it. Watch the game, chat with fans, test your college football knowledge to win tickets to purchase authentic sports merchandise, like an Ohio State jersey if you want. They're going to win anyways. Pre-game questions are now live. Download the free BetterCast app and answer them now. Available in the App Store and Google Play stores. No purchase necessary. Always free to play. So, Nick, Colin, we just went over the top 14 QB and running back rankings. Let's go over now the wide receiver and tight end. I wish Chris Moxley was here to go over the tight end rankings because I'm going to have no idea who any of these players are. But let's talk about the wide receivers really quick. And we are going to start with, I believe, number one, Malik Neighbors. LSU going up against Texas A&M. Talked about at the beginning of the show. He is 133 yards away from breaking the single season LSU receiving record. Xavier Legette, South Carolina versus Clemson, comes in at number 2. We have got Christian Horn, wide receiver for Appalachian State, going up against Georgia Southern. Devon Vele, did I say that correctly? I'm really bad at pronouncing. Probably Colin is too, so I don't know why one of us are trying to host the show here.
I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah, Nick, can you correct us on that? Is that correct? Did I say it correctly?
I think you're close enough. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Utah wide receiver going up against Colorado. We've got Brennan Presley, Oklahoma State wide receiver, going up against BYU. Isaiah Williams, Illinois wide receiver, going up against Northwestern. Ricky White, UNLV wide receiver, going up against San Jose State. Rome Odunze, Washington wide receiver, going up against Washington State. Brian Thomas Jr., LSU wide receiver, going up against Texas A&M. Tajon Palmer, UAB wide receiver, going up against North Texas. Hey, Trayvon Rudolph, or is it? Never mind. Well, that's a inside joke for another day. North Illinois wide receiver going up against Kent State. Malik Washington, Virginia wide receiver, going up against Virginia Tech. Caden Robinson, Appalachian State wide receiver, going up against Georgia Southern. And Chris Lewis, Troy wide receiver, going up against Southern Mississippi. Nick, break it down for us. Who are your favorite plays this week, and who just missed your list that you would have in here?
Well, I mean, I absolutely agree, and my numbers also have Malik Neighbors number 1 this week. I'm a little bit lower on Legette, and he's outside of my top 15 for the week. He'd be pretty close to top 15 today. one that really has caught my eye, and I was taking a good hard look at when we were when going through the Prize Picks selections a little bit later in the show. My projections on Isaiah Williams are higher than the Prize Picks number, and seeing that he's number 6 on the rankings on the site suggests that he's in line for a good day. He is top, he's 13th actually in my projections this week. But man, that not that Northwestern is all that great, although they are going to a bowl game this year. But they just have a way of just slowing things down and mucking it up. And this could be a 14-13 type game. And I'm just not sure if he's, going to get enough opportunity. So he's one that I've struggled with a little bit personally. One who is not on this list who ranks pretty high for me is Lincoln Victor at Washington State. And they've got, of course, a bit of a three-headed monster there going up against Washington, who is certainly a tough matchup. They're not as good on defense as they are on offense, of course. But Victor, I think, has an opportunity in what I believe is going to be his last game for the regular season, probably last game, because I don't think Washington State's going to win, and they're going to miss out on a bowl game. So him being in the top 10, top 15 seems right to me. I think he's going to have an opportunity for like a 12 catch day. Now, will he get in the end zone? Not sure, but he projects pretty well, and I think I'm on board with him also.
Colin, any thoughts?
So to address Brett in the chat there, he said, where do you guys have Tet McMillan for Arizona? I think that's a good call out there. He just missed our top 14 there. He by less than a point. We're still projecting him over 20.5 fantasy points. So I still like him this week. And then to address Colin Kelly's question there between Xavier Weaver and Ashton Hawkins, I kind of agree with Corey. I think Weaver is really tough to trust if Shedeur doesn't play, which honestly, I wouldn't expect Shedeur to play. This is mostly a meaningless game for Colorado. You may as, they're not going to be bowl eligible. They're not really fighting for anything. Why risk any further injury to Shedeur there? So I would lean Hawkins, but I don't feel great about that matchup either, going up against South Alabama. That's a legit defense. That's a good team, and he's probably the wide receiver like 3 on that team. So if you have any other options between those two, I might lean and look for somebody besides those. But if you have to pick one, I think Weaver if Shedeur goes, and if he doesn't, I probably lean Hawkins. As far as wide receivers on the list there, I think that Malachi Corley going up against Western Kentucky wide receiver, going up against Florida International is another guy who just missed that list. And he's another guy that I like this week too. Maybe hasn't been quite as dominant as we were hoping for this year, but he's still been very good over the course of the year. And, if you're still playing right now, it's a championship. He probably helped get you here. So I think you got to start Malachi Corley as well.
One item of note that could go into your thinking, just breaking news out of Tempe from Chris Cartman, who covers the Sun Devils. Elijah Badger is out today. As a non-serious injury suffered last week against Oregon, but it will hold him out in today's game.
That's good to know too. Make you muted, Matt.
Nick, I want to I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but one of the best wide receivers all year has been Marvin Harrison Jr. Where do you have him? Because he is not high at all in our rankings. I was actually scrolling, trying to find him. Where do you have Marvin Harrison Jr. this week against a very good Michigan defense?
Yeah, and it won't surprise you based on where Henderson is in my projections. Harrison is pretty high as well. And part of the reason that, I compare my rankings to the ones that are on the site, and I think both of them have been very good this year, and they line up in a lot of situations. But something that I do a little bit differently is I take into account a 3-year window for the team, the head coach, and the play caller. So Ohio State is going to be, Ohio State players based on that history. They're going to be high every week. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 2 in my rankings. I do make adjustments for the opponent. And of course, Ohio State's got one of the toughest opponents, maybe the toughest matchup of the week. But just that long-term history that I do think is significant enough to, factor in, probably has him a little higher than he should be, just based on things like weather, the matchup, the history with the rivalry. But I think the way we do it is good for 95, 98% of players, but probably a little too high on Marvin Harrison. I'm not sure he's going to be a top 5 receiver this week, but he's good enough that it wouldn't shock me if he goes for 105 or 125 yards today.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, all joking aside, arguably one of, if not the best defenses out there right now in college football, but Kyle McCord very much has that attitude of F it, Marvin Harrison's down there somewhere. So I imagine he is going to get a fair amount of targets today. We'll see if he's able to do anything with it. I like the boldness of the call, though. All right, let's talk about tight ends, a position I am not at all familiar with, but we are going to talk about him anyways. Top 14, Chris Moxley, you're in the chat. Just shout it out for me. Where are all these guys from? Number 1, we have Eli Wilson, Appalachian State versus Georgia Southern. Number 2, we have Benson, Kansas State tight end, going up against Iowa State. Next, Drake Dabney at 3, Baylor tight end, going up against West Virginia. Jake Brenningstool, Clemson tight end, going up against South Carolina. Justin Jolly, Connecticut. UConn has a really good tight end? Good to know. Wait, never mind. Going up against UMass. Brock Bowers, Georgia tight end, going up against Georgia Tech. Oh, goodness. How do we say this? How do I say this guy's name?
Kaleo
Nick,
Blunde.
help me out. That guy. And I don't even know. I really have no idea who. Thank you. Go ahead. Who are they? Who's UNLV playing? It's not Michigan, because that's Michigan's best win on the year. Who's he playing?
San Jose State.
San Jose State. You said that earlier. I probably should remember that. Bryson Nesbitt, North Carolina tight end, going up against NC State. Cade Stover, the Ohio State University tight end, going up against Michigan. River Helms, Western Kentucky wide receiver, going up against Florida International. Trent Penix, NC State tight end, going up against North Carolina. Zach Horton, James Madison tight end, going up against Coastal Carolina. RJ Maryland, SMU tight end. Why did I not remember who SMU is playing? Someone help me out. Navy, thank you. I don't know why that's going to be a good game. JJ McCaffey, Georgia Southern tight end, going up against Appalachian State. Give us your best picks and who just missed the list, Nick.
Well, a guy who's been good all year, but was off to an incredible start and has sort of tailed off just a little bit. I've still got Dallin Holker as a top 5 tight end. Colorado State gets Hawaii today. I think that the Eli Wilson as number 1 is really interesting. I do think it's a good matchup. He does not rank really very high at all in my projections this week. He's 63rd among tight ends. But one of the things that I love about the rankings that are on the side is they really do weigh heavily. I believe it's the last 3 games, but I know it's a window of recent performances. And Wilson's been great recently, so definitely understand that. But I would, if I've got Holker and I'm trying to decide, am I able to go out and grab Wilson last second or play Holker, who's got a little bit more of an established track record? I'm personally probably going to lean Holker, but it's good to know that at this position in particular, which has been so impacted by injuries, that there may still be a league winner or somebody that's going to help you get over the top here in the championship week, who's projected number 1 in our projections, which I think really do a very good job on the whole. One name that JJ Parker in the chat brought up, and I think is very fair to consider. There's a weird situation going on at Syracuse. Schrader, the quarterback, Garrett Schrader, is injured, has been severely limited. I think he played 3 snaps last week, and they were all handoffs. Sounds like he's expected to play a little bit more this week, but a lot of players are getting snaps at quarterback, including tight end and former quarterback Dan Villari. So, he's thrown some passes. He's going to get some goal line touches. Could absolutely be a good player to slot in your lineup at the tight end position, because he's probably going to get plenty of opportunities today for Syracuse against Wake Forest. So think that he's probably somebody in your league probably came across him a couple of weeks ago and snatched him up. But if you've got him, I absolutely would feel comfortable rolling him out and think that the upside for him to have a few touchdowns today is worth it to put in over just about anybody.
Yeah, I completely agree on Dan Villari there. And we're talking about Dallin Holker. He is tied with JJ McAfee, actually in points for projected points for us. So he would have just made the end of the list there. But I agree. I think Holker should be a little higher. I have a tough start sit question here that maybe you guys can help me out with. I have Dan Villari and I have Dallin Holker. I'm leaning Holker myself, but which way would you guys lean there between Villari and Holker?
I think the upside for Villari is worth it. Holker does project, top two for me today, behind Brock Bowers and then David Martin Robinson of Temple, who played yesterday. But I just said, man, Villari, he might, throw 7 or 8 passes today. He might have 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. I think that you just can't. I think you just can't sit a guy who's got that level of upside.
I think I'd go with Holker just because Nick went with Dan.
You guys aren't helping me.
Your decision.
Yeah, you're not helping.
No,
me.
I agree with Nick. I would go with Dan. I mean, the opportunity he has to absolutely smash, like you said, if he has a passing touchdown, rushing touchdowns, I mean, that's gonna likely smash whatever Holker does. But I would probably lean Dan Villari as well. We do have a couple, not about tight ends, but a couple people asking about Jalen White, the Georgia Southern running back, asking if he is going to be active today. I was trying to search. I did not find anything on it, so I don't know for sure. I didn't know, Nick, Colin, if you guys have any insight on him.
What I saw early in the week was questionable, game time decision type thing. I haven't seen an update either. Haven't read anything specific. He is a senior. This isn't senior day for Georgia Southern, but it's possible that this would be his last game. I always kind of lean toward a guy in that situation is probably most likely to give it a go if he can. But I don't know anything specifically.
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to keep an eye on there as well, because I do really like Jalen White if he does play today, which actually is something I'll get into a little bit later. But he logged 55 snaps during last week's game, and it was just kind of listed as day-to-day. So I would expect that Jalen White is going to play today as well. And a great point that Nick brought up there. He's a senior, potentially last game here. So I think a lot of things are pointing in the direction of Jalen White playing. I would operate under that assumption, but just definitely monitor it leading up till kickoff, in the next hour or so.
All right. So, Nick, give us your best bets, including a Drake versus Will Smith rap battle. Is that correct? Or is that what we're getting on the card here?
So I posted in our Campus to Canton Discord in the NIL level betting channel. I usually lean on my numbers. Don't lean on my gut instinct in most cases. But I was pretty sure that the books, the odds makers, weren't going to post a number high enough that I was going to be on Drake against North Dakota State in the FCS playoffs today. North Dakota State, not as good as they have been in years past. South Dakota State is the new North Dakota State, at least this year. But this number, when I saw it first, was 36.5. My projections are in that range, not a huge projected edge there, but I've got 33.89 in one of my two FCS models and then 37.6 in the other. I followed it up yesterday, checked it again. The number had gone down to 31. So on the show sheet, I said, okay, North Dakota State, even though somebody out there, does not see this game like I do, I'm expecting, 55-3, something like that, just because Drake's not very good. North Dakota State's not as good as they used to be, but they're still quite good. I don't know if somebody in our chat was listening because I said I'm still up for it. It's now North Dakota State minus 38. So we saw a big shift. This is on DraftKings. That's the one I'm referencing here. There might be other numbers out there, but was it 36.5 down to 31, now up to 38? Seems like folks are on board with me as we get closer to
snap.
Right, exactly. So I'm still of the opinion, this is going to be a 45-3, 55-3 type game. So I like North Dakota State. Don't think that there was going to be a number big enough, but I guess we'll have to eat that 38.5 since we're doing this live. So we'll see, or 38, not 38.5. But other numbers, and these have been what I've leaned on pretty heavily on the tailgate the last few weeks, and it's worked out quite well. When our three different projection models, the CFB winning edge projection models, all line up on the same side, and that is for a favorite to cover. Got off to a real slow start this season, the first 5 weeks, but since week 6, I finally ran these numbers. Have been pretty vague about they've been good, but I hadn't had the numbers right at hand. We're 34-21 entering week 12 or entering week 13 on those. We're currently 3-1 in week 13. So that's 37-22 over the last 2 months, basically. There are a lot of them this week, and some of the numbers certainly have moved. We released these in the Campus to Canton Discord on Tuesdays. But one that I like a lot is Purdue today against Indiana. Sounds like Hudson Card is going to be back for Purdue. Indiana's just not a very good team. When we released it, it was 2.5. And all of our numbers are Purdue by 6 or more. So we're still on board with 4.5, which is what it was late last night. We'll have to see if it's moved even more, but do like Purdue today to win that game by about a touchdown or more. Also, East Carolina -3 against Tulsa. ECU has been bad this year, but they've shown some signs of life. And Tulsa is one of the worst defenses in the country, has had a ton of injuries, ton of inconsistency at the quarterback position. So I like ECU today to win by a field goal or more. All of our projections are like 4.5, 5. One for the 2, actually, for the late evening slate. I like USF -6.5 against Charlotte. USF, if they win, are going to be bowl eligible. Charlotte, as anybody who's paid attention there, things have not necessarily been trending in the right direction. The offense just really has struggled. And I think that USF offense is really starting to put it together. Byron Brown projects as one of our top 3 guys this week at quarterback. So think that there's a really good opportunity there for USF to win closer to double digits than the 6.5. And then Cal against UCLA today. We are on UCLA. Our numbers are all 2 touchdowns or more. And I can't, in our numbers, they are not set up to deal with, off the field type things. There's some uncertainty around Chip Kelly and his future at UCLA. There was a report 2 weeks ago that he's done, but then they go out and, just dominate USC last week. Nothing's official yet. So I think that there's a real opportunity here that UCLA lives up to our projections, beats Cal by, 2 touchdowns, 17 or more, and does enough in these last 2 games against UCLA's oldest rivals, to maybe save Chip Kelly's job. So I think UCLA has an opportunity to win big over a Cal team that is going for bowl eligibility. But again, our numbers see maybe the biggest edge of any today in this situation I mean, we've got UCLA projected by 16.5, 14.75, 13.73. And then the last number I saw on it was UCLA as a 9-point favorite. So pretty big projected edge there. And I think I agree.
Jim Rubin in the chat. I can't believe it's championship day. All of my leagues will have their ships determined by the end of the day. Thank you guys for all of your help. Thank you, Jim, for all of your questions and tuning in all year. And then Stephen Whittle asks, Ray Davis? I believe he's playing today. I haven't seen anything on. Are you asking like if you should play him? Because I'll have an answer for you here in a minute in our start sit conversation, Stephen. But I haven't seen any injury or anything. I believe he's playing. So if you want to start him, you can.
Yeah, as far as I know,
missing anything on Ray Davis?
Yeah,
Okay.
as far as I know, he's
That's
in, and he's projected right around top 15 for me this week. So I like him.
Oh boy, that's gonna hurt when I get my opinion on Ray Davis later. Chris Moxley in the chat too says, lay it with NIU getting 19.5, and he's yelling at the world. Aren't you supposed to be on a plane somewhere, Chris Moxley?
Well, I think we have to put that. We have to put that down officially, right? That's
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha. We got you, Chris. We'll get that taken care of for you, buddy. All right, we are going to take a quick break. When we get back, we will have the Devy Sesh prize pick, start, sit, and we will pick games. Also, check in on some more injuries if anything has been confirmed. This is Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network. We will be right back.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year? And he goes, yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL. And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there. NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one, the Holy Grail of NHL games. NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
Now let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta. It didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version. And then
you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
To Canton.
What's going on, everybody? Campus to Canton, the Tailgate Show with the Better Sports Network. Before we jump into our starts and sits, we've got some prize picks, injury check-in, and game selections. We're going to throw it to Corey with the Back to Devy crew and the Devy Sesh video for Week 13.
What is going on, Campus to Canton family? Corey Prairie here from the Campus to Canton Devy team. It's the final week of the regular season, and if you were lucky enough, you got a big matchup with a lot on the line this weekend. But like most of us, it's time to start looking ahead and maybe take a look back at the year that was and take a look at a few players you need to be keeping an eye on going into the offseason. Let's go. Now, I want to start out by handing out some of my own personal awards for this season. I want to start with the most improved player of 2023, and really this is the player that rose the most in my rankings. And I'm heading over to Oklahoma State to talk about sophomore running back Ollie Gordon, who, coming into the final week of the season, was leading the entire Power 5 in rushing yards. He's also second in rushing touchdowns, he's second most in 10-plus yard rushing plays, and he's first in 15-plus yard rushing plays in the entire Power 5. He's also built a pretty nice receiving profile for himself, where he's almost got 30 catches on the year and the 9th most receiving yards for running backs in the Power 5. When you take a look at the running back landscape in Devy, especially once you start removing some of the guys we expect to enter the draft, I wouldn't be surprised if Ollie Gordon is pushing for a top 10 running back selection by the time startup drafts roll around next year. Now, if we're going to be talking about risers, we also have to hand out the award for the biggest faller of the year. And I mean, there's a few pieces of low-hanging fruit out there, whether you want to go with Arkansas running back Raheem Sanders, maybe Kentucky wide receiver Barrion Brown, Clemson wide receiver Adam Randall, but I want to talk about the most impactful fall, at least in my opinion, and that's Penn State running back Nicholas Singleton, who just hasn't followed up that freshman season like we were hoping. We knew he was a raw running back coming in, but that freshman season set the bar really high, and we were hoping for a lot more development by this point, which just really hasn't happened. He's regressed in most major categories. I mean, even looking at one of his best traits from his freshman season in his yards after contact, which sat over 4 yards his freshman season, that's down under 3 yards at 2.71 yards after contact. That's one of the lowest numbers for a Power 5 starter at the running back position. I mean, even looking at his missed tackles forced, he's only forced 15 this year compared to 34 last year. That sandwiches him in between names like Utah running back Jalen Glover and Stanford running back E.J. Smith. I mean, you could even argue that Kaytron Allen has been the better running back for Penn State this year and deserves to be ranked higher in Devy rankings than Nicholas Singleton. I think you're going to have a hard time pulling the trigger on this guy within the first 3 rounds of your startup drafts next year without some real faith. For my next award, I want to take a look at the Devy Comeback Player of the Year, and how could it be anybody else than LSU quarterback Jaydon Daniels, who was almost completely written off by the entire Devy community coming into the year, and all he did was place himself squarely in contention for a Heisman, improved on almost every category that we wanted to see, and is now in talks as the quarterback 3 entering this NFL draft. Now, for my last award of the day, I'm giving out an award that I like to call the Face of the Future Award, and I'm handing it out to an underrated freshman that surprised us this season. Not those high-ranking freshmen that we knew were going to hit. That was part of their rankings. We had a pretty good feeling they were going to do well. I'm talking about a name that surprised us this season that I expect to rise throughout the offseason. And we're heading over to Georgia Tech to talk about wide receiver Eric Singleton Jr. The 5'11", 175-pound speedster has been terrorizing defenses down the field this year, averaging an average depth of target of 15-plus yards and the most yards on targets 20-plus yards down the field in the ACC this year. He has an athletic profile that features a 10.21 100-meter dash and a 20.75 200-meter dash. I'll be looking for him to continue to expand on his route tree and develop into more of a wide receiver than just a downfield threat, but we know that speed kills, and we know that the NFL loves that speed, so I expect Singleton to be a name that's going to be talked about a lot during this offseason. Now, looking ahead, I'm going to be keeping my eye on a lot of these successor type situations, especially with bowl season coming up, where we might get a preview into what some of these teams might look like heading into 2024. And I'm talking about situations like the LSU QB room. Is Garrett Nussmeier going to be a guy that we can rely on going next year? How much are we going to see of Malachi Nelson, with Caleb Williams likely sitting out the bowl game? And another guy that's really caught my attention this year in South Carolina quarterback Lenore Sellers, who's flashed in his brief appearances in mop-up duty this year. The 6'2", 245-pound athlete has gone a perfect 4 for 4 for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as showing off that athleticism with a 36-yard touchdown run. He's going to be the likely successor to Rattler, and I expect him to be a riser going into this offseason. This is also going to be the last chance for a lot of those freshman wide receivers to break those year 1-0 thresholds, with extra opportunity coming from a lot of these top guys who are going to be sitting out heading towards the NFL draft. Looking at Oregon wide receiver Troy Franklin, who is going to be sitting out. Are we going to see a little bit more Jurion Dickey? And even heading over to LSU, where we're probably going to see Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors declare, can Shelton Sampson break out and show us something in this bowl game to make us more confident in his value going into next season? I'm also going to be keeping my eye on some of these running back situations throughout the bowl season. Even a place like Notre Dame with Audric Estime likely heading off towards the NFL draft. Can freshman running back Jeremiah Love show something in this game and become a guy in contention to be the successor heading into 2024? Even at USC with Marshawn Lloyd heading off, can freshman running back Quentin Joyner flash a little bit and become the guy that we're relying on in that USC backfield next year? And even the guy I'm probably most excited for over at Oregon, if Bucky Irving sits out heading into the NFL draft, Jordan James becomes a really interesting guy heading into next year who's flashed a lot this season. But that's going to wrap it up for this week's Devy Sesh, guys. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast every Wednesday morning, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus to Canton podcast network. Don't let anybody else tell you different, and make sure you guys are keeping it locked with Campus to Canton all season long.
Awesome. Well, thank you to Corey for that. A lot of great names on there. Apparently, one Chris Moxley in the chat's pretty upset that Lenora Sellers didn't make that list, though. You know, I mean, we all know who Lenora Sellers is, though. No worries there. All right, let's start with our start and sits. I'm going to come to you here first, Nick. Give us who your starts and sits are here for Week 13 Championship Week.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I do want to say that Corey and Mike have done a great job all season. I've learned a ton because I am not a Devy guy. I don't want to get into the Devy wars with everybody, but I think that those two guys have done an excellent job all year. My start for this week surprised me a little bit because, like I mentioned before, and I've been talking about this one team because they've been the only one I've been able to reference the last 3 weeks or whatever. I have a lot of decent running back options, but in my one championship matchup this week, I am starting Rashad Amos from Miami of Ohio. He is somebody who's been a pretty late add to my team, but feel a little bit better about starting him over some guys who've dealt with some injuries or some sharing the top running back position or the workload. Guys like Phil Maffa, who has been in consideration for me to start most weeks. Also somebody who I listed as a start last week who fell well short of my expectations, didn't play particularly well, wide receiver Georgia Southern Caleb Hood. So I've made the decision to start Amos this week. Miami of Ohio has been a different offense since Brett Gabbert went down. We were seeing a lot of production for guys like Gage Laverdane and that wide receiver core when Gabbert was the starter. But now that they have moved on, Avion Smith is starting at quarterback, and a guy like Amos has really come on and has sort of taken the reins of that running back position. It's gotten a pretty heavy workload, and the matchup today against Ball State is a pretty good one, I think. So I think they're going to lean on Amos. I think that he is a better spot for guys, my team in particular, but a better option than somebody like Maffa, somebody like Nate Newell, who's been really banged up and seen his workload cut in the last few weeks at Appalachian State, and Caleb Hood, who I have been very high on at times, but I just don't think this week is the week. So Rashad Amos is my toughest decision this week, but decided to slide him in.
Colin?
Yeah, so my first start here is a guy that we talked a little bit about earlier in the show, Jalen White. Obviously, keeping an eye on him and his status here, but he did play a good amount of snaps last week, 55, listed as day-to-day. Kind of unclear as to what the injury is, but I would feel, as long as we don't get news that he's not going, he's somebody that I feel confident starting this week. He's, had two rough games, the last two with 9.5 and 14 fantasy points. But before that, he had 27.9, 18.5, 31.2. He's been really good all year. He gets a lot of work in the receiving game as well. But they go up against Appalachian State this week. Appalachian State's rush defense is bad. They allow 175.5 rush yards per game, which is 110th in the country. They're 20th worst in defensive rush EPA per play. Their pass defense is pretty solid, and that's kind of what helped them limit James Madison last week. But also, if you're a vibes guy here, feel like there's an App State letdown game coming after that huge win last week. We like a lot of the App State receivers in this one. And maybe this gets to be a high scoring game, but I think Jalen White will have an opportunity to score here. And I think that this is a good matchup for him. My other start is, Nick talked about a guy that he wasn't expecting to say as a start. And this is a guy that I was not expecting to say as a start either. I've been off of Joe Milton, the quarterback at Tennessee, pretty much all year, but I think this is a really nice matchup against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's pass defense is really bad. They allow 351 pass yards per game, which is 123rd in the country. They're 14th worst in the country in defensive pass EPA per play, 6th worst in defensive pass success rate. Joe Milton's been a little rough in his last 2 games. Both of them have been under 20 fantasy points, but they were against Missouri and Georgia, and both of those defenses are very good. So I think in a soft matchup here, if you have Joe Milton, you probably took him pretty early. This is your chance to start him. I'm firing Joe Milton up. And then on the other side of that, I am sitting Jaydon, the running back at Cal. Nick highlighted in this one how you don't really always know what the vibes are going to be, what the off the field stuff is going to be with Chip Kelly, but I don't really think it matters that much. UCLA has a very, very good run defense. They're second best in the country in rush yards allowed per game with 64.6. They're 6th in defensive rush EPA per play, 31st in defensive success rate, and 5th in defensive rush explosiveness. They also only allow 16.7 points per game, which is 10th in the country. They're limiting scoring. They're limiting running backs. And Jaydon tends to disappear against a good competition. So if I'm in the championship, Jaydon probably had a nice role in getting you there, but I don't know if I trust him here in this one. And then my last sit is Frank Gore Jr., running back at Southern Miss. They play Troy this week, and Gore has been hot over his last 4, 38, 23, 35, and 18 fantasy points. But those came against some soft defenses. App State, I was talking about how bad their rush defense is earlier. UL Monroe, one of the worst teams in the country in terms of defense. UL, the University of Louisiana, and then they got Mississippi State, but it was the game after their head coach got fired. So he tore up all 4 of those teams. Troy, on the other hand, very good rush defense. They allow less than 100 yards per game, 98.2, which is 13th in the country. They're 22nd in defensive rush success rate, 13th in defensive rush EPA per play, and they only allow 16.6 fantasy or points per game, which is 9th in the country. So another team that limits scoring, very good rush defense. I'm not trusting Frank Gore Jr. this week either.
All right, for mine. Nick talked about it earlier. He has Travion Henderson ranked fairly highly. I think you've got to start him. I get it. Michigan is, again, as I said, arguably the best defense currently in college football against the powerhouses of East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue, and Maryland. Whoop! That is a murderer's row, people. They have just the massive amount of talented running backs that they have played. It's been crap, actually. Complete crap. They have not played anybody with the offensive line or talent that Ohio State has and that we'll be bringing today. Travion Henderson, if he was banged up like he was earlier in the year, I would definitely be sitting him. But he has been gangbuster since coming back from that injury. I think they were actually holding him out because of that. He looks like he's 100%. I think he's going to go out there, and they're going to have to rely on him. Rumors about McCord's ankle being pretty hurt. Chris Moxley, I can show you. I'll forward you a text that I just received of Kyle McCord actually running and throwing off platform and looking just fine. Text message I received about 5 minutes ago. I think McCord's going to be just fine. But that Michigan defense is going to be bringing the house against Kyle McCord. I think we're going to see a lot of screen passes to Travion Henderson. They're going to be dump offs to him because that is the one thing CJ Stroud did not do last year that Kyle McCord has not been afraid to do this year, and that's dump off to the running back. Chip Trayanum has not looked good this year. Dallin Hayden has kind of been nothing. I think this is going to be the Travion Henderson game. I think that you should be starting him. He is going to have a massive day. Next one, going all in on this game. Emeka Egbuka. I know he has not been good this year at all, but that defense is going to be doing everything they can to stop the best wide receiver in college football, and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think Mecca is going to be the one who stands out, much like he did in this game at times last year with CJ Stroud. I think Kyle McCord will be looking to him early and often, not expecting him to be like a top 24 play, but I do think he makes it up as a top 36 play, so a wide receiver 3. He's a guy that is getting absolutely no respect at our website. I believe that he is ranked as the 229th player, projected for just a measly 13 points. He's going to smash that. Start Emeka Egbuka today. For my sits, look, I'm sorry, Steven, you asked about Ray Davis earlier. I'm sitting him. Now, I know Nick said that he had him ranked fairly highly. Nick is a much smarter man than I am, so probably listen to Nick. But Louisville, number 19th ranked rush defense. I think this is actually going to be a very good game today. I think it'll be a little bit low scoring. Ray Davis, I think, is going to score a touchdown. I actually have a play on him today's in time touchdown, but I don't think that he puts up a ton of yards for you. I just think he has a tough day here against a very good rush defense in Louisville. My other one is probably not going to make much sense when I read it to you. Keon Coleman versus Florida. Florida's pass defense is ranked 115th out of, is it 133? Is that correct, Nick? I know you'll know the number. I don't know that Colin will. 115th out of 133 teams, but their rush defense is 104th. I think that with Tate Rodemaker out there now, obviously with us knowing that Jordan Travis's college career is over with, I think they're going to rely much more on that run game than they will the pass game. And that is going to limit what Keon Coleman does today. I think they are just going to do anything they can to get through this game and win, make it to that ACC championship game as a shot to get into the playoffs. So I'm sitting Keon Coleman today. I don't think that he goes out there and has a massive day against a very poor Florida defense. Thoughts, concerns, Colin? You looked a little scared when I said start Emeka Egbuka.
I have Emeka Egbuka in a number of places, and he was the person I highlighted on Campus Life this week as the biggest disappointment of the year, both from a CFF perspective. You were taking him in the first round. And you took him in the first round of Campus to Canton leagues as well. And he has not helped himself as much as some other wide receivers have in the country. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say he's a start, but I do understand the game plan there with some check down, some quick hitting stuff, and that would benefit him. So I would start him over Keon Coleman, if that helps.
Yeah, I wonder what Emeka Egbuka thinks about you as one of the hosts of the C2C network. Maybe this most disappointing there. Maybe sort of shots.
You know what? I probably am one of the most disappointing hosts out there. He's probably not wrong. If we had hosts,
Felix Sharp sets that bar pretty low. I think you can jump over that one. I had to get my Felix shot in. Barnabas asked actually really quick. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on this. So we'll throw some NFL in here. Better bromance, Dak and CeeDee Lamb or Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr.? I mean, that's an easy answer for me. But what do you think, Nick?
I did see a few minutes of the Cowboys on Thanksgiving at my in-laws' house, but other than that, my knowledge is almost nothing. So give me McCord and Harrison.
That's the correct answer. But go ahead, Colin.
Yeah.
I don't want to skew the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Dak and CD here. I think no matter who the quarterback is.
Sean, mute his mic. No,
We
Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison have played together for like 30 years. They're the better bromance. We're moving on to prize picks. Nick, give us your best prize picks.
All right, so mine are all receiving props this week, and what I've tried to stick with what's worked for the most part, where we look at how our projections see some value on an over, because our player projections do tend to skew a little under in most cases. One that jumped out to me, and I know he's dealing with a backup quarterback this week. Graham Mertz is out for Florida against Florida State. But I think Eugene Wilson, the third, over 38.5 receiving yards, there's good value there. And our projection is too high. We are not downgrading Florida, the impact of the Mertz injury enough, most likely. But project that Wilson's got an opportunity to go to, upwards of 90. Last week, only had 23 yards, but had 7 receptions. So if he gets 7 receptions this week, he's definitely going over that 38.5. I would expect. And then, you look at the 5 games prior to that, he's not been held under 63. So this 38.5, I wondered if I saw it incorrectly. I mean, I just don't quite understand where that line is coming from. One that I wanted to take a closer look at, and things have changed a bit because the Elijah Badger 64.5 receiving yards was taken down by prize prize picks because he is not in this week, not going to go this week. So I think there could be some value on Troy Amir over 42.5. If we were to bump up Amir to that wide receiver 1 spot in Badgers stead, I would project him for about 59. Jaden Rashada is going to be back this week. It sounded like on Friday that he was in line to start, but then there was a report this morning that he had was late to a meeting and so is actually not going to start, but is expected to play. If Rashad is playing, I think we'll see a little bit less of that rotation of guys like Scatabo and Jalen Conyers getting a large number of snaps in the Wildcat. So I think that there's value on Arizona State passing overs potentially. I think Troy O'Meara is going to be in a pretty good spot for those. And one that caught my eye, I mentioned Isaiah Williams. We are on the over. I think I'm going to roll with that today. He projects really high and think that he's going to get plenty of opportunities, plenty of targets. We'll just see if he can break a tackle and take a screen pass a long way to help us get over that 73.5. But one from Oklahoma State that I like, Rashad Owens has been quite good for the Pokes this year. That game against BYU, pretty good matchup. We have multiple Oklahoma State wide receivers who are projected to go over, but see the biggest edge in Owens because there hasn't really been a clear-cut pecking order. Who's wide receiver 1, who's wide receiver 2. Owens has gotten wide receiver 1 production about half the time. And so, think that there's definitely value on him at 61.5. We've got him projected for 83, but think that there's, a likelihood that multiple Oklahoma State receivers, depending on how that pecking order shakes out today, are going to be in line to go over that 61.5. And Owens is the one that I decided to go with.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of good plays that Nick mentioned there. I was looking at the Eugene Wilson one too. Like you said, if he gets 7 receptions again, I don't see him going under that total again. That was surprising last week. I think one of my favorite plays this week is Josh Kelly, wide receiver for Washington State, over 14.5 fantasy points in this one. He's been over that in 3 straight games. He's got 130 yards in back-to-back games, 10 and 12 targets in both of those 2. So the game script is also going to set up well for him too in that Washington State matchup. But Washington, very good offense. Washington State, their defense was decent early in the year, but they've definitely fallen off. So I expect Washington to get up on Washington State. They're going to have to probably throw the ball to get back in, and that's going to set up well for Josh Kelly. Another one that I really like this year is Jalen Milroe over a half a rushing touchdown. He's got 12 rushing touchdowns on the year. Now, 3 of those came against Kentucky, and 4 of those came against LSU. So a lot of those came in 2 games, but over his last 4 games, he has definitely gone. There was one game against Chattanooga where he didn't score the rushing touchdown, but he did not play a ton in that one. So I expect him to score in this one on the ground against Auburn in that Iron Bowl. And then the last one I have is Jamari Thrash, over 4.5 receptions. He has been under this total in back-to-back games, but before that, he had 7, 8, and 9 receptions. And over his last 5 games, he's got 6 and 5 targets the last 2 weeks, but then 11 and 17 in the weeks before that. So I think this Kentucky defense as well is susceptible through the air. They allow 238.2 pass yards per game, which is 92nd in the country. They're 14th worst in defensive pass success rate. Their rushing attack or their rushing defense is good though. 22nd in the country in terms of yards allowed per game. 29th in defensive rush EPA per play, 44th in defensive rush success rate. So if Louisville is going to win this game, I think that they're going to need to do it through the air. And Jamari Thrash is going to be a big proponent of that.
All right, mine are going to be mainly centered around one game, not surprising to anybody, but we're going to start with Kevin Concepcion. He's gone over the 62.5 in 3 of his last 5 games. North Carolina, a middle-of-the-road pass defense. I think that Drake May and North Carolina are going to come out here throwing in possibly their last game together. Devontae Walker, I think, might play in the bowl game. Just because he's missed a good part of the season. But Drake May, this could be his final game for North Carolina. I don't know that he'll play in the bowl game or not. So I think they're going to come out on fire and passing, and NC State is going to have to keep up. I think Kevin Concepcion is going to go over that 62.5. Travion Henderson, I mean, we talked a lot about who Michigan has played and who they haven't played. That offensive line is completely healthy for Ohio State. Granted, it is not what it was last year, but Travion Henderson, I think, is going to be the focal point of that offense today. 83.5 rush yards on Prize Picks. I'm taking the over. I think he is going to go over 100 yards today. They're going to rely heavily on him, and all it takes is one run. I mean, go back and look at last year. You know, again, I know it was Michigan that did it to Ohio State, but at one point in time in that game, Donovan Edwards was not having any success, and then he breaks off a couple big runs. I think Travion Henderson can do the exact same thing against his Michigan defense. I think he's going to have a big day today. Meka Egbuka, I said start him. His over-under is sitting at 55.5 yards. Take the over. I think he's going to have a big game today, as that Michigan defense will be all in on trying to stop Marvin Harrison Jr. And last but not least, I feel like I've disrespected him a lot this year. I'm taking my boy Kyle McCord. 237.5 pass yards. This is probably not a smart bet. So, you know, take this with a little bit of a grain of salt because he has not been good this year. He's actually gone over 237 yards only twice in the past 5 weeks. But this is his chance to prove it. This is the game. He's been waiting 3 years for this game to walk out there and beat that team up north. There's so much behind the scenes stuff that goes into why he would want to beat that team up north. And maybe I'll tell you guys about it on an after show one day. Chris Moxley, Felix Austin know about it. I know about it. I can't tell you how amped up he is for this game. I think he's going to go out there. He's going to win Ohio State this game and push them toward the Big Ten championship and a playoff. And to do that, he has to play well. They can't rely completely on Travion Henderson. I think Kyle McCord's going over 237.5 pass yards. Vibes only. There's no stats that are going to tell you that. This is just completely vibes, gut feeling. I think he's going to go over. Colin, you look like you're impressed.
Vibes only. I love the vibes only plays.
So you put the bet in Kyle McCord.
That's exactly what I was doing on my phone. Right
Screenshot it and send it to me because I want proof because I don't believe it.
See,
we're gonna,
I don't know.
All three,
Maybe he might be a little too amped up. I took it in a slightly different direction. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, you can never tell with Colin. You know, he's you know.
Stoic.
You can't ever tell. He's stoic. You can't ever tell what's really going on with that guy. All right. We are going to take one more break. And when we get back, we're going to do some injury check-ins. And then we are going to talk about the games. We're going to get Barnabas on here to talk about the NFL players we're watching in these games and so much more. This is Campus to Canton, Tailgate Show on the Better Sports Network. We will be right back.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, but they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl.
And
when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. He played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game.
Yeah.
That they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
It's college football game day, and we're getting you ready for all the action on campus to Canton.
What's going on, everybody? Campus to Canton Tailgate Show on the Better Sports Network. That is Nicholas Ian Allen. That is Colin Decker. I am Matt Bruening. We are going to do some injury check-ins, let you guys know of the injuries that we know of, who's in, who is out. We'll bring Barnabas up here in a couple minutes, and we'll be doing game selections for the big rivalry games today. He'll give you guys some NFL players to look out for as well. But really quick, I don't know if you guys saw this. It was just tweeted out about 30 minutes ago, and we're going completely off script here. It's a big deal to me. On the 5-yard line, apparently, is Oregon State and Jonathan Smith leaving Oregon Smith to go to Michigan State. It's a big deal. I'm a massive fan of Aiden Childs. I think Jonathan Smith, who is the current head coach for Oregon State, is a very underrated offensive mind in college football. His offenses are usually very good quarterbacks as well. I mean, you could argue, rebuild DJU stock a decent bit from what we saw at Clemson. Colin, I'll throw it to Nick first. He's the much smarter college mind out of the three of us here. Do you have any opinions on I wouldn't either. You have any thoughts on him possibly going to Michigan State? I mean, on the 5-yard line, that sounds like that's practically a done deal. Him leaving Oregon State to go to Michigan State.
Yeah, it's something that there's been a little bit of buzz, I believe, on Tuesday. Football Scoop said that Jonathan Smith had emerged as the top candidate, and then there was a Nicole Auerbach report Friday night that said the same, confirmed the same, and then it sounds like it's moving quickly now that Michigan State's season is done or Oregon State's regular season is done. It would be a great hire, in my opinion. I've sort of given up on trusting my gut, really leaning into, this guy's going to be a home run hire. This guy's not going to be very good. I've just been proven wrong way too often. But under the circumstances, and Chris Moxley said something very similar to this in our CFF Slack last night when we were talking a little bit about it. Jonathan Smith probably is the best possible hire, like of guys who are actually with Michigan State would be able to get on board, would be potentially available. He's probably the best one, and part of that has to do with the unfortunate circumstances around the Pac-12 just sort of crumbling around Oregon State and Washington State. I think Jonathan Smith is an Oregon State alum. Loves the place, legend there at the school. If this had not happened, I think that perhaps Oregon State would have been able to hold on to Jonathan Smith. But because there are so many unknowns about the future of that program, created an opportunity where he could be lured away by what a lot of people somewhat, I think, unfairly would say is a lateral move at best. I do think that Michigan State is a very, very good job, and the fact that they're able to get potentially the top available coach on the board, is a great one. Don't know if it'll work out. We'll see, how it all plays out. But right now, it seems to be the best they could hope to do, and sounds like they're very, very close to making it official.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for Jonathan Smith as well and what he's been able to do there at Oregon State. They were a bad team when he got there, and it took him a little bit of time to turn them around, but he has them into a perennial top 25 team and a team that last year knocked off Oregon, and they were very competitive in some games this year, especially against that Washington team. This past week against Oregon, this week they got blown out a little bit there, but there's a lot going on around that program. You had to figure that the players in the room heard the rumors about Jonathan Smith as well. So just a tough situation all around. And I feel bad for Oregon State because of like what Nick said, had this, Pac-12 not completely dissolved and left them hanging in the breeze, then Jonathan Smith might still be there and he might be able to continue that success that he's had. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. I think Michigan State is a solid job. It's going to get tougher where, with UCLA and USC, Washington and Oregon coming into the Big Ten, that's only going to get more competitive. So he'll have his work cut out for him as well there. I also feel bad for Aiden Childs and Damian Martinez, friend of Campus to Canton. We've had him on podcast before. Feel bad for him. He tweeted out, "My plan is my plan." So we'll see what ends up happening with those players, where they go, if they transfer. But I think as far as a hire goes for Michigan State, I agree with Nick. This is as good of one as they could have hoped for, especially given some of the recent, instances that have gone on at Michigan State. Jonathan Smith runs a very clean and uptight program compared to, what everybody reportedly from what everybody says about him. So I think this was a great hire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he could be a very good fit for the Big Ten as well. I said, I think he's a very underrated offensive mind. We go back and look at the quarterbacks he was starting last year in Ben Branson, Tristan Gebbia, who transferred to the Ohio State, and how productive they were. I think he always seems to have a very good defense as well. I mean, Oregon State has been kind of a staple of a really good defense in the Pac-12 for the past couple of years as well. So I think he's a really good coach. Like I said, I do feel we have very good relationships with Damian Martinez and Aiden Childs, and I hate to see them kind of possibly left at Oregon State. We'll see what happens. But I mean, if Aiden Childs follows him to Michigan State, I think that QB room is wide open. If he doesn't, we were big fans of Sam Levitt, the true freshman there. I liked Caden Hauser, who we've seen have some up and down, more down than up, but some fairly good moments so far this year for Michigan State. I think it'd be a great thing for either one of them. He was my pick to go to Texas A&M. I thought if Texas A&M really wanted to turn it around, that's the kind of coach they should go get. Man, I think Michigan State knocked it out of the park. All right, so injury check-in here before we bring Barnabas on and do some game selections. A couple we've already talked about. Hudson Card, we do know, is in. Elijah Badger, the wide receiver, is out. Nick, with Garrett Schrader being a game-time decision, would you be willing to throw him in your lineup, or would you just at this point pivot and try and put somebody in is going to play?
Absolutely not. If he does play, it's going to be handing the ball off. He's not going to be throwing the football. He might get a few snaps down, by the red zone, get him a touchdown to end on. Perhaps that would limit Dave Villari's upside, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. But I don't think Schrader's going to do anything of major significance today.
Roman Wilson for Michigan, not listed on the injury report. Colin, his receiving yards is set at 47.5. You taken the over or the under on that today against the Ohio State University?
I think that's really tough because he's the type of guy who could get that in one play. He's an explosive receiver. He wins downfield really well. But I think overall volume and just kind of the flow of this game would make me lean towards the under on that. Not super confident on it because, like I said, he could very easily just one play go over, but I think I would lean under.
Blake Shapen is out. Bo Collins out. Logan Diggs is warming up. He has missed the last 2 games. And Rice quarterback JT Daniels is also out. I wanted to save this last one so we give a quick discussion before we bring Barnabas in. Evan Stewart didn't travel with the team. Texas A&M as they go to play LSU in their final game. Now, he has been dealing with some injuries. all season, but there have also been a lot of reports that his name might be one going in the transfer portal. Colin, from a C2C perspective, if he jumps into the portal, how big a deal is that for him, and where would you like to see him go? If you don't have a place, I'm kind of throwing this to you off the cup. Don't worry about it, but you're a professional, so I think you got it.
Well, my homer answer would be I'd love to see him go to Penn State. We need wide receivers desperately, but I think that's a pipe dream at this point. But I think in terms of Evan Stewart entering the portal, this is big for C2C leagues for his Devy value because, Texas A&M under Jimbo had not really developed wide receivers all that well. And we saw Evan Stewart come in and perform as a freshman despite that. And I think that just goes to showcase his talent. We've heard comparisons to Garrett Wilson thrown around a lot. I think that's pretty apt. So he's a very high level wide receiver. He's going to have his choice of places that he can go. He can write his own ticket, basically. He was a highly thought of recruit. I'm not sure if it was 5-star or borderline 5-star, but he's going to have a lot of suitors out there. And you just hope that he is smart enough to pick a place that's going to be able to showcase his talents because he's put up 2 very solid years in a subpar passing attack. He could have a chance to really ball out next year in the right location. So I think this is huge. In terms of places to go, I think it's a little too early to say. He was connected to Texas before he flipped to Texas A&M. Texas is going to be losing a lot of wide receivers, so that could be a potential landing spot. And, I'm going to hold on to the sub 1% hope that he ends up at Penn State as well.
Yeah. Texas was a very heavy lean for a while for him, actually, before he went to Texas ATM and their supposed buying of that class. As Chris Moxley says in the chat, the Magic Johnson, I'm not going to be here gif is definitely feels apropos right now for Evan Stewart. He was a 5-star. So, yeah, he was easily one of the best, if not the best. I think he was technically listed as wide receiver 2 for the databases, the recruiting databases. So he was a very good wide receiver in that class. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up going. All right. Let's get Barnabas up here so we can make our game picks. We are getting very close to time. We're going to start with the Governor's Cup in Kentucky versus number 10 Louisville, who are getting 7.5 points. Go ahead, Nick. Who are you taking and why?
So my numbers are pretty firmly 2 of the 3 projection models are on Kentucky to cover. Do have Louisville favored in all 3, and our stats only model, what I call the Prism model, is actually on Louisville to cover. So do think that Kentucky matches up pretty well talent wise. Certainly Louisville has had the better season record-wise and is legitimately a very good team, but has played a relatively weak schedule. Probably hasn't played a team that is going to be as tough maybe as Kentucky. However, this time of the year, and we've already touched on a few of these types of situations, there are some off the field discussions that are kind of circling around the Kentucky program. I'm going to say his wrong name incorrectly. I think it's not Mark Stoops. It has been linked pretty heavily to Texas A&M this morning. So that could, play into it a little bit. So numbers wise, I'm on Kentucky, but this is a game that I could see going a variety of different directions for a variety of different reasons. I think they're absolutely capable of winning outright. Do think that Louisville is capable of hitting a few big plays against maybe a less than fully motivated Kentucky team and winning by 2 touchdowns. So not a huge edge for me.
I think I'm going to go with Kentucky here in this one to cover that 7.5 point spread, but I think Louisville will win this game. Louisville just doesn't really blow teams out. They kind of struggled with Virginia a couple weeks ago, although that Virginia team has been playing pretty hot. But I struggle to see Louisville getting over that 7.5 total, but I think they'll win the game. So give me Kentucky against the spread.
Give me Louisville. Barnabas, what you got?
Yeah, so I got a little tired of just picking matchups this season, and so I'm going to start talking about some Senior Bowl stuff. And so Louisville this month, I guess, had 2 guys accept Senior Bowl invites, and Jamari Thrash and cornerback Quincy Riley as well. So the matchup I'm looking at this week is going to involve Quincy Riley in Louisville's CBs versus Kentucky's wide receivers. Kentucky's passing game is a little bit a little bit subpar this year. And I think someone like Devin Leary could benefit a lot from the Senior Bowl, considering how low the bar was set last year with those quarterbacks. I know like 10 rookie quarterbacks have started in the NFL this year. And frankly, the Senior Bowl guys have looked good at the NFL, but at the Senior Bowl, they did not look good. And so the bar is set low enough that I think someone like Devin Leary could boost their draft stock somewhere like Mobile. But yeah, let's watch for Robinson, Kean Brown, and see how they do against Storm Duck and Quincy Riley, who's already going to Mobile. And Jarvis Brownlee is questionable today, so let's see if he plays.
Storm Duck is an
all-time name.
He
was at Penn State for a hot minute.
There's also another all-time name in this game, actually, in Kentucky defensive tackle Octavius Oxendine. So don't forget about that one.
Yeah, say that 10 times. Good luck with that. Number 8, Alabama getting 14 points versus Auburn at 3:30 Eastern in the Iron Bowl. Nick, who you taking?
So I do think personally that Alabama's in a really good spot to win this one pretty big. However, numbers wise, and it's pretty rare for my numbers to think that one team is going to cover more than 2 touchdowns on the road in a conference game where the opponent is pretty talented. And Auburn, despite some ups and downs, and definitely last week was a major downer, getting blown out by New Mexico State. This is still a fairly talented team that's not going to be just completely outclassed by Alabama. So my projections, are right around double digits, between 9.75 and 12 on the projected point spreads. Auburn does have the home field advantage here. I personally am not that confident, though. Even though I'm numbers wise on Auburn, I definitely think that this is a game Alabama's probably going to win by 3 scores.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with Nick. I don't have the numbers, so I'm just kind of going all vibes here. But this Alabama team is very good. They've come on, then they've responded really well with Milroe at the quarterback, at the helm, solidified, no questions now. They've looked pretty good down the stretch. I'm going to be really interested to see them next week in the SEC championship against Georgia, presumably. Anything crazy could happen, but I'm almost positive they've both locked it up at this point. But I think Alabama covers this 14-point spread. I don't think Auburn's a very good team. So give me Alabama.
Yeah, I think Alabama covers by 3 touchdowns. Nick Saban last year on live television trying to, talk about why Alabama deserved to make the playoff. I don't think he wants to do that again this year. I think style points are going to matter. I think he's going to go out there and put as much on Auburn as he can to kind of show that if Alabama goes out there and beats Georgia next week in the SEC championship, why they deserve to be in the college football playoffs. Barnabas, who are you watching in this game?
Yeah, so we have a couple confirmed Senior Bowl guys. Usually the top team players on the top teams don't really accept all-star game invites until after the season's over. So we wouldn't expect anyone from like Alabama, for example, to be on these lists. But the cornerback duo from Auburn, they've both accepted their invites in Nehemiah Pritchett and DJ James. They're both your kind of like a hover and snap type of corners where they'll stay in phase and they're close enough, but they won't try to lock you up super close. They'll just, bat the ball away when it comes close. So both very good corners. And then someone that I think we might see in Mobile, and the matchup I want to see today is Malachi Moore versus Rivaldo Fairweather. I talked about Malachi Moore when they played against Texas, and he saw a lot of JT Sanders, and JT Sanders got the ball a fair amount in that game. So let's see if he can do better against Rivaldo Fairweather. Alabama DBs, especially those like that star position, always gets a lot of work, and they're super smart guys. Look at Brian Branch and how he's doing in the NFL right now. And Rivaldo Fairweather, I was shocked, and Nick, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know how many tight ends have 20% of the passing offense. Rivaldo Fairweather just short of 20%. And so, I know Auburn doesn't pass a lot, so fair points, but Rivaldo Fairweather is more of your wide receiver type tight end. And so him versus Malachi Moore is what I'm looking at. But I don't think this matchup really affects the game outcome all that much. Someone like Seth McLaughlin, who I hope might go to Mobile, and that Alabama offensive line, I think their game plan is just to bulldoze and score 5 rushing touchdowns today against Auburn.
I will be able to tell you in January when our CFB Winning Edge returning production database is live in the Campus to Canton C2C winning edge tier. All I can tell you right now is Kennesaw State tight ends have 22.93% of their offense.
Well,
we
that
have
is
133
one
teams
hell
to
of a
go in that.
one hell of a tease. Tune in a month and a half, and you'll find out who is getting 20% of the offense. The Apple Cup, Washington State versus number 4 Washington. Washington getting 16.5 points. Who you got, Nick?
So this game actually lines up with what normally is my top pick criteria. A favorite in all 3 projection models, expected to cover. Kind of interesting to me, maybe nobody else. Those numbers are 16.62, 16.76, and 16.66. So there is no edge whatsoever in that. But that criteria has been very good for us the last 2 months. And so I think that I'm a believer. I think Washington State gets it done by 17 or more today.
Yeah, I'm with Nick here. I think Washington is going to cover this. I think they're just a flat out better team, and they're going to want to, go into this Pac-12 championship on a high note. So give me Washington at plus or minus 16.5.
Yep, give me the Huskies. Who you watching, Barnabas?
Yeah, so we have one confirmed Senior Bowl guy in this game, Chow Smith-Wade, the corner from Washington State. Like I said, top teams don't really have their players at confirm yet, so we don't expect Washington guys. I'm looking at the tackles here because I want to see some edges in some All-Star games. And so the edges from Washington, Braylon Trice and Zion Tupuolu-Fatui, and Washington State's guys, Brandon Jackson, Ron Stone. They're the top 2 at sacks in each of their positions, as can be expected from the edges on them. And so let's look at their tackles. Wazoo has Fa'alili Faumo playing. He plays right tackle. I don't know if they're going to flip him to the other side because their left tackle pull is questionable today. And then on the Washington side, we have Troy Fautanu, who's their left tackle.
The Florida Cup, number 5 Florida State versus Florida State getting 6.5 at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. I'm taking Florida State. I think that they're going to be able to get that. But Nick, who you take?
So I technically am on Florida State. Do have them projected to win by double digits in 2 of our 3 models. But personally, I could see Florida winning this game outright. I think if there's a playoff contending team that's in the most trouble of losing to in an upset fashion today, it's Florida State.
Yeah, give me Florida to cover this line. I do think Florida State's going to ultimately pull it out, but I think it's going to be a close one. I would definitely feel good under a touchdown. So give me Florida.
Oh,
Barnabas?
Yeah. Well, you didn't ask me about Evan Stewart, but a guy as a Florida State alum, I can dream about Michael Pratt transferring up to Florida State and Evan Stewart going over there. But anyway, confirmed Senior Bowl guys: Jaheim Bell, tight end, listed as a tight end. He's just an offensive weapon, and Braden Fisk, who's an interior defensive lineman. Reminds me a lot of Greg Gaines from Washington a few years ago. The matchup I'm watching today is Akeem Dent, who I hope to see in Mobile for Florida State. He's kind of a do-it-all defensive back. He's going up against Ricky Pearsall. Battle of backup quarterbacks today. Tight ends and slot receivers are backup quarterback's best friend, and I want to see some action there.
All right, the Palmetto Bowl. Just give me your guys' picks real quick. Number 24, Clemson getting 7.5 points for South Carolina at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I am taking South Carolina not only to cover but to win outright. Go, Nick.
South Carolina to cover, but Clemson to win.
Give me Clemson to cover and win. I think they're just a better team.
Not much for me to talk about. Spencer Rattler is confirmed for Mobile.
The game. Let's go, Barnabas. Hit us who you're watching, and then we'll make the picks real quick.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that it would be a rough game for Ohio State if Tommy Eichenberg and Michael Hall were not playing, but they are playing today. So I'm looking at Tyleik Williams and Michael Hall going up against that maybe a repeat Joe Moore Award offensive line. Last year, the game plan was just bulldoze the Ohio State defensive line, and I hope they stop it this year. And I also set the over-under on Mike Sanders still over interceptions at 1.5.
Under. Nick, the game. Number 2, Ohio State versus number 3, Michigan. Michigan getting 3 points at 12 p.m. Eastern here. Who you take?
So my 3 projection models are all over the place on this one. The Talent Edge model gives Ohio State the outright favored to win outright. The Prism model, the stats only model, has Michigan covering. Officially, I'm on Michigan to win, but Ohio State to cover.
I am so sick of
How dare
Michigan. Give me Ohio State. Come on.
To cover or win outright? Where you
outright?
Outright. That's what I'm talking about, Colin. That's my boy. You're my boy, Colin. Got Mr. Banks a lot. That team up north. That team up north. Get out of here. JJ, who's life insurance on Ohio State. I'm with you, baby. Ohio State's not going to go in there. We're kicking the Wolverines, you know what, out of where's their crappy stadium called again? Who cares? The big house? It's going to be the small house today after Kyle McCord goes in there and shreds them. Go Buckeyes. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Campus to Canton Tailgate Show on the Better Sports Network. We'll catch you guys next week.